Three, two, one, here we go. RAINMAN'S Take podcast. Observations on the world we live in. My take on current events and other topics of interest. Also interviews with some really cool people. So let's get the conversation going. Everybody, it's the Rain Man. I want to introduce my guest. This is my friend Ganch. Ganch, say hi to everybody.
Hey, everyone.
My friend Ganch is from India. He's a physician, and he's on today to talk about what it takes to get a visa for an international physician, international professional to come to the United States and work. So that's going to be the main sort of focus of our talk today. But before we get into that, if you are part of the Rain Man's Take community, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. If you are new to the program, welcome. I know you're going to love the content. So if you could, on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, go ahead and tap that subscribe button. That way it's going to help me get the word out to more people with the YouTube algorithm so that we can get this conversation going. So without further ado, like I said, I wanted to have Ganch on today because obviously immigration and illegal immigration are front and center in the news right now. And I don't know much about it. And so I wanted to talk to somebody who's actually living through it. And that is, what does it take for somebody from another country who really wants to come to the United States, who really wants to participate in our culture, our society, and really make a difference like he is as a doctor? What does it take to do that? So that's kind of be our focus up front. And then afterwards, we're going to get into the specifics about the U.S. medical system and where there are some challenges coming in the near future, and also how international doctors coming to the U.S., how they might be able to help. With that being said, Ganch, why don't you just do me a favor? Give me a little bit of your background, where you're from, when you got to the United States.
Sure. Yeah. So, I'm Ganch. Thank you so much for having me. I'm originally from India, born and raised in Bombay. I did medical school in Bombay, and then I moved to the U.S. I moved to the U.S. in 2017.
Okay.
So it's been 7 years going now. And, like you said, immigration's the center point of all discussions right now. And one of the unique things about immigration is that when I'm talking to an American citizen, they have very little idea about immigration because it doesn't affect them in any form or fashion, at least not directly. And the same thing about India. Like, if you ask me about how do you become a citizen of India, I have no idea because I was born as one, right? And so you don't put your thought into it about what the system's like, and you don't experience it. So, my journey as an immigrant has been rewarding, to say the least. It's been very challenging. Yes, it comes with its own set of Pandora's box of problems and sacrifices. But at the end of the day, it's been really rewarding, and I would 100% do it again. But I do think that looking at it from a lens of a foreign trained physician who's now been in the U.S. for 7 years, and I've had most of the bulk of my training here, right? I just did medical school in India, but then, I've done my residency here and, the fellowship and all of that. So majority of my training has been in the U.S. And, to sort of give you a little bit perspective about, visas. So there's multiple different types of visas, right? You can divide them into immigrant visas and non-immigrant visas.
Okay.
The visa that most physicians come to the US and train on is called a J1 visa, which by its virtue is a non-immigrant visa. It's called an exchange visitor visa. And my official term is I am an alien physician. So next time someone tells you aliens don't exist, that's wrong. Aliens do exist.
Now, is that J1, is that for all professionals across the board or specifically for the medical field?
J1 can be used for other professionals too,
Okay.
but for physicians, there's mainly two options. There's the J1 and then there's the H1B. And the H1B is an immigrant visa
That's the one that you hear, like I've heard of that one.
yeah.
And so what's the difference?
So the difference is that the H1B visa is of an immigrant intent, and that it's called an immigrant visa, and the J1 is of non-immigrant. So before I become a permanent resident, I would have to switch from a J1 to an H1,
okay.
and then move on towards permanent residency and ultimately citizenship.
Gotcha. Okay.
The other visa is the F1 visa, which is a student visa, which if I were to do medical school in the US, then I would come on that visa. So if you see any students that are training or that are not training, that are learning or enrolled in a school, then they go on to the F1 visa. But in medicine, we finish school and then we're still training, but it's not just school because we're also working as residents, right? So then, comes the J1 or the H1. The differences between a J1 and an H1 are pretty stark in the sense that H1s are harder to get as a physician to come train to the US. I would say at least a majority, about 80% of the physicians that come to the US to train come on a J1 visa. And predominant reason for that is J1 visas are not sponsored by the university or the institution where I'm training. They're sponsored by a central body called ECFMG, which is the Educational Commission of Foreign Medical Graduates, which licenses us to as like, okay, you're ECFMG certified. So basically, once you're ECFMG certified, only then you're eligible to train further in the US.
And is that organization, are they in India or is that in the United States?
It's in the United States. It's in Philadelphia.
Okay.
And that is the central governing body that licenses foreign physicians from all across the world. So in order to get into a training program in the US, the ECFMG first has to certify you that, yes, you have given all the exams, that we have verified that you've actually gone to a legit medical school and that you have a degree and that you've met requirements, that now you're ECFMG certified to be able to pursue further training in the form of residency. Yeah. So ECFMG sponsors J1 visas. Okay. And not the university or the program that you're enrolled in.
Oh, interesting.
So programs prefer that because they don't have to deal with the Department of State, right? They just have to deal with ECFMG, which is easier. Also, they don't have a lot of upfront costs, as opposed to an H-1B, where the program is responsible for getting the H-1B for the trainee. And they have to get a lawyer, they have to file, they have to do all of that. So it definitely leads to more heavy lifting for the program to get an H-1B.
Yeah.
And historically, the best and the best and the worst of the worst programs are for H-1B visas. And that is because J-1 is not as preferable to an H-1 because it is not an immigrant visa. It doesn't immediately translate to permanent residency.
Oh, but the H-1 does.
The H-1 does. The H-1, it depends again from what country you're in. So you could potentially apply to an immigrant to a green card or permanent residency or citizenship. Right. Now, I'm on a J-1 visa. I am ineligible for a green card until I meet certain requirements. The commonest solution that people offer me is, why don't you get married to your girlfriend? She's an American citizen. Yeah. Even if I were to get married to my American citizen girlfriend, I still wouldn't be getting a permanent residency, right? So there are caveats, and the J-1 visa is called the exchange visitor visa, which basically means you come to the US, you train, then you either go back to your home country for 2 years, or you work in an underserved area for 3 years. To sort of fulfill that waiver requirement, right? In case you don't want to go back,
right?
And a lot of physicians go back. A lot of physicians do the underserved route, but then the underserved route again is such a whole other box of problems because the system hasn't been changed in 2 decades, and it doesn't account for the changes that has happened to the physician workforce, and the definition of an underserved area is very complex.
Yeah.
You could find an underserved job in New York City because, there's underserved pockets in every major city.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you're, out in the boonies, but it basically means that, it's how the area is defined. And these haven't been updated in a long time.
Interesting.
So that further complexifies Waiver.
Yeah, I can imagine, and we'll definitely get into the specifics in terms of the medical field. When you were in medical school in India, and you wanted to apply to the United States for your follow-on training, what was that process like from India, from the Indian side of the pond, and then what was the sort of, how was it interacting with the United States government to try to get that? Is it a pain in the ass, or was it relatively smooth process?
Everything is a pain in the ass.
That is true. When you're dealing with the U.S. government, everything is a pain in the ass, and that's the problem.
With immigration, it is bureaucratic. Things take time, but there is a streamlined process. When I was looking to pick a country for training, I looked at Australia, I looked at New Zealand, I looked at the UK. The US wasn't the first thing that came to my mind. But then ultimately I settled on the US because I felt the system, if you remove the immigration aspect out of it, the healthcare system is very fair and just to foreign medical graduates as opposed to some other countries. And overall, I felt like the training that physicians get in the US is far more superior than most of the countries. And so that's why I picked the United States. So yeah, it wasn't a straightforward, easy way. First of all, it's not everyone moves, right? In my class of 125 kids in one of the top medical schools in India, I think maybe 5 of us left and the rest stayed back. So it's only a very certain kind of person who decides that they want to move from one part of the world to the other part of the world, because it's not easy. It's extremely challenging, especially if you want to do something that is surgical or something that is more specialized.
Right.
Whereas, trying to get into a training field with, something like primary care, internal medicine, or pediatrics, or psychiatry or family medicine is relatively easier. It's still hard, but it's relatively easier. So the rule of thumb was, when I was talking to people, they told me, if you want to do anything surgical, you shouldn't go.
Should not go.
Because you will not ultimately get a position to train in.
Meaning that they thought that you didn't have what it takes to get a position as in a surgical position in the United States.
Correct. Every foreign physician feels that for a surgical specialty, they're gambling. And so you have to put in extra work, and you basically have to prove yourself times 100.
Dude, you're like the black sheep. You went out and just F everybody. I'm making it happen.
Yeah, I love it. For me, it was like, I don't want to wake up when I'm 50 and question myself, like, what would my life have looked like if I hadn't moved? And I was like, you know what? I don't care if I fail. I don't. I want to try, because it's okay if I fail. I can always come back and do it. But what if I don't? And the other thing was, once I train in the US, once I'm US board certified, then it's easier for me to practice in other countries. But the US doesn't care about any country that you've trained in. You could be the top physician in any part of the world, but if you want to practice in the US, you have to repeat your training.
No, and that friends that are in the field, I hear that all the time. It's a very interesting dynamic. But hey, for the time being, the United States has the best training, and that could change down the road based on what we're going to talk about here coming up. But until then, you come to the United States, you get that check in the box, and now you can go anywhere in the world. And they say you train in the United States, and everybody knows what that standard is. So thankfully, that's still here. Let me ask you this: so you've been here since 2017,
correct?
How often do you have to deal with like renewals and those sort? Is it just an onerous process to stay here? I mean, or do they make it? Does our government make it easy for people who actually want to be here and are actually training and are actually participating and making things better? Is it an easy process or not?
I wouldn't call it an easy process, but to any extent.
Really?
In fact, I haven't left the country in the last 5 years, because the last time I left the country, there was a delay in me getting back in, because my visa is renewed every year, because my contract in medicine is renewed every year.
Okay.
So there's two different things that we should definitely talk about. There's a visa stamp and there's a visa status. A visa status basically means are you legal status, which you can renew while you're inside the country, and you don't need to leave the country to renew that.
Okay.
So if I don't leave the country, I can keep renewing my status legally every year to, stay legally inside the United States and work legally inside the United States. And that's not a problem. That's a relatively streamlined process. However, if I leave the country, then I need a stamp to enter back in. And a stamp can only be obtained at an embassy outside US soil. So you don't get a stamp inside the US. So every time I have to leave the country, then I have to go to an embassy and I have to interview or, get away
almost like reapply.
And get a stamp in order to come back in.
Yeah.
So what that does is, especially with COVID, embassies all around the world were having so much backlog, right? And I had so many friends who would go visit family and would not be able to get a date to come back in. First of all, you have to schedule your date at least multiple months in advance.
Right.
And then, visa processing can take anywhere from 2 days to 6 months. And so a lot of, physicians are worried, especially the ones in training, that, well, if I'm gone for 3 months, I can't graduate in time. And that completely throws off their cycles if they want to specialize and all of those other things. So it's not been easy because of the constant need to renew my stamp every year. And so I just figured that, I might as well just stay in the US and not leave, which has been, I'm one of the lucky ones that my family can come and visit me, but not everyone's as lucky.
Right. And so one more question kind of about the whole process, and then we'll get into the specifics of medicine. In your mind, in your view, if you were president for a day and you had the pen that you could change something to make it I guess the way I'm looking at it is you see everything that's going on with illegal immigration, and then the whole concept of immigration, at least my understanding is you bring people in who want to be here, whether it's they want to be Americans, they want to live the American lifestyle, they want to participate in our culture, or they are legitimately are running away from something and they have that refugee status. Put that aside for a second. The immigrants that want to come in, how do we make it easier? The process in your specific example, what would you do to make it easier for somebody like you who actually wants to be here, wants to participate, wants to add to the value of where you are? Can we make it any easier, or is it just bogged down in a bureaucratic nightmare?
I think currently it is bogged down in a bureaucratic nightmare, but I do think that there's so many things that can be done to improve the process.
Give me an example.
For example, if I'm in training for 4 years, I am in training for 4 years. Yes, my contract does get renewed, but 99% of contracts in residency get renewed, right?
Okay.
So my initial visa stamp could have just been for 4 years. And then that way, I'm not having to get a stamp every time I leave.
Gotcha.
And the embassy's not having to deal with someone like me. Right? I mean, I feel bad for the workers in the embassy and the immigration department. They're overworked.
Yeah.
There's only so many hours in the day. And, the US is definitely the country that everyone wants to move to. Yes. Because this is the country that is built on immigrants and is, it's the American dream that everyone's looking for.
Yeah.
I do think that, our immigration system or America's immigration system, I feel, needs a major overhaul, with sense that, skilled workers are contributing to the economy, paying taxes, helping people, need to have a more streamlined way of entry, especially in healthcare.
Yeah.
This country doesn't have surplus doctors or nurses. In fact, we're in a shortage.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where it gets really weird because, it's kind of like you're walking around like you're the big guy in the block, and then next thing you know, you realize you're not wearing any pants. Yeah. And so as a result of this potential problem, this world-renowned medical field or the U.S. medical system is on a very precarious stance right now. And like you're saying, there's a potential shortage. And is that shortage going to be covered by, is it coming from native-born doctors coming up in the system, or is it for people like you who want to come to the United States and participate and fill in that shortage? Yeah, that gap.
I mean, the shortage is going to be there. I think talking about shortage, the first thing that we have to acknowledge is that
wasn't an earthquake, by the way, folks. The table just moved. I apologize.
Is that the United States has an aging population. More than 80 million people by 2050 will be 65 and older. And currently, I think it's like 50 million or something, if I'm not wrong. But there's going to be a 47% increase.
Okay.
So we're an aging population. What do older people need? Healthcare. They need physicians. They need hospitals, right? So there is a huge need for physicians and other healthcare professionals in the U.S. The currently portrayed deficit is going to be, I think, 124,000 physicians by 2038.
Okay.
Right? And this gap only widens when you look at primary care.
Yeah.
And primary care is the most important part of medicine.
Yeah. All right, dude, real quick, stop right there. Bring it back. When I hear people say it's going to be a bazillion by 2090, my eyes gloss over. How bad is the deficit right now? Do primary care physicians, are we in a deficit right now?
Yes.
Or we are. Okay.
100%.
So it's not like, 12 years from now, it's going to be really bad. It's bad now.
It's bad now.
Gotcha.
And it's only going to get worse.
Yeah.
It's bad now. It's going to get real bad, moving forward. And one of the other things is, it's hard to expect people to go into primary care given the current climate in healthcare. And that could be a whole other podcast by itself as to why U.S. medical students are not picking primary care specialties, as to why most people that go to medical school in the U.S. want to specialize. They want to do, specialties that are more exquisite. For a multitude of reasons. People have loans that they want to pay. Specialties pay more than primary care. It's about prestige. It's about burnout rates. It's about, what you're doing. And, when I was in training at the institution where I was, one of the classes, med school classes that graduated, out of, I think, 130, 2 went into primary care.
Really?
And then the rest were specializing.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the question, how do we get more primary care physicians, right? Well, foreign physicians, more than 70% of foreign physicians that come to the U.S. go into primary care.
Is that because there's a shortage and that's the easiest way to get in?
It's because it's easier to get into primary care.
Yeah.
It's all about supply and demand, right?
Yeah.
The supply is less for specialties and the demand is more.
Yeah.
So it's harder for foreign physicians to snag those spots.
Yep.
And it's the exact opposite for, primary care specialties. And so that naturally leads to, the U.S. relying on foreign physicians to fill that gap.
And has the visa program kind of adjusted itself for that? So if a foreign doctor says, I really want to train in the United States, I'm going to check the primary care physician box, because that's going to give me my best chance of getting there. Is that kind of how that works, or not really?
It's more of, a chicken and an egg situation where they know that they will probably end up in a primary care specialty. And that's what most people move here for.
Yeah.
People who want to do surgical specialties just don't move here because they're like, well, it's going to be really hard to get in.
Right.
Not everyone wants to, take the gamble.
Yeah.
Not everyone can take the gamble.
True.
Right? Fortunate ones can. So that being said, once you get into a residency program, you then deal with immigration. Right?
Gotcha.
And so, I think that the J1 program that ECFMG heads is a pretty streamlined process for most parts, wherein, most almost all of my friends or colleagues that I know that are foreign are pretty much on a J1 visa. And everyone's been able to make it work. But, there's definitely challenges to it, like, the stamping process, like not being able to leave the country as often.
Right.
And, feeling, in fact, there's been peer-reviewed articles that are on PubMed, which is the National Library for Medicine, about foreign physicians and the whole visa problem that stems from the load or the overburdening on the immigration system, right?
Yeah.
And I would take the liberty to say that most physicians, like 99% of the physicians, are low risk as far as their immigration risk is concerned.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
They want to be here. They want to participate. This is something that is a goal for them. I could totally see that.
Correct. And at the end of the day, I remember when I was delayed in getting my visa to come back inside the US when I was in training, it was chaos. I was supposed to work so many shifts, I couldn't.
Yeah.
And my colleagues had to cover me.
Yeah.
And ultimately it was a strain on the system, right? Like, my absence was not without its repercussions,
right,
to the US healthcare system, to the hospital where I was working, to the patients that we were caring for.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it's a domino effect.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So now here we are. Let's start now with the shortage of primary care physicians. It seems like right now, foreign doctors are coming in to sort of start to kind of fill in those shortages. How do you see that right now in terms of where that's going to go in the next couple of years?
It has been a steady supply.
Yeah.
The number is steady, or it increases every year as to the number of foreign physicians that move to the US. And I think it's somewhere along the lines of like 4,000 per year or something.
Really?
Yeah. Now, thinking about programs that focus on primary care, which are specialties like family medicine, internal medicine, pediatrics, psychiatry. These are considered the conventional primary care specialties. And then obstetrics and gynecology is another one, because OBGYNs take care of a lot of primary care for women. And these are considered, the main specialties of primary care. In some states that are remote, like the Dakotas, as much as up to 50% of physicians that are training in these states could be foreign.
Wow.
Because it's hard for Americans to move from these states, because they're probably not from the Dakotas, right? So it's hard. People want to train where they're from, or where they have family.
Yeah.
Now, considering that we train all these physicians for primary care, the natural instinct would be to retain those physicians, or to make it easy for them to stay back and serve the communities that they were trained to serve, right?
Yeah.
The Medicare spends billions of dollars every year in educating residents and in training physicians to help increase the physician workforce. Now, for foreign physicians, after they finish training, especially if they're on the J visa, let's talk about the J visa. Because it's an exchange visitor visa, it was designed with the thought that after they finish training, they either go back to their home country for 2 years to prevent an international brain drain, or they work in an underserved area in the US for 3 years to be able to stay in the United States. And that sounds great. I think that's a great option. Some people want to go back to their country. I know so many of my colleagues who trained in the US and now they've gone back to their countries, which is good, because then these countries have really well-trained physicians, and it can really help global communities.
Yeah. Local.
Correct. But at the same time, a lot of my physician colleagues choose to stay and serve the communities that they were trained to serve.
Yeah.
Now, what that leads to is, different ways in how physicians can stay back. And working in an underserved area can be accomplished through a variety of different routes, right?
And can you, like, routes towards citizenship?
Yes, ultimately.
Okay.
So these are the routes that you work in an underserved area for 3 years, then you switch from a J1 to an H1.
Okay.
You work on an H1B visa, and then you apply for green card,
Gotcha.
and then ultimately get citizenship.
Okay.
Now, the biggest challenge with the whole underserved process is that the most commonly used program that most foreign physicians use is called something known as a Conrad 30 program, which hasn't had any changes in the last 2 decades. And it allows 30 spots. Every state in the US has 30 spots.
That's it.
To retain foreign physicians every year. So every state can only retain 30 foreign physicians. And that is for all specialties.
Wow.
And they're very focused on getting primary care physicians, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Which 100% makes sense. I think that is a great strategy because you want to rebuild from the grassroots. But that doesn't mean you don't need specialists.
True.
Right? Now, someone like me who's a specialist, who can also do primary care, but I'm predominantly a specialist, it is incredibly hard for me to be able to go to any place that I want, which needs me.
Yeah.
So I could get a job at a place where I want to be, where the community needs me, where they don't have a urogynecologist serving the community, but it might be hard for me to get one of those 30 spots. So I think that becomes, a challenge. In some states, for every state, it's different.
Right.
Some states are more specialist friendly, while some states are not. And currently, there is actually a bipartisan bill in the Congress to increase these spots.
You would think that that's a no-brainer.
I completely think that it should be a no-brainer.
Wow. And so where is that? And do you know where that bill is?
I think it was launched in 2021, but it still is, it's somewhere.
Yeah.
It's in, it's somewhere.
Yeah.
I don't know details of, where exactly it is and what's going to happen of it, but it's in process. But that's the other thing, right? Like something like this is such a no-brainer. Shouldn't be sitting on a desk for 2 years in the most developed country in the world.
Yeah.
Right? Like you expect this stuff from third world countries. Yes. Not from, the great United States of America.
Yeah. Yeah. So right now, the shortage in primary care seems like it's being backfilled with foreign physicians. Obviously, it's a lot harder in the specialties. Where do you see this for a guy like you who's becoming highly specialized in your field? I mean, where do you see this going? Is there going to be a day where you could be forced to leave the country because of the number of quotas that are there? Or?
That is on the table. Yeah. I mean, there is a possibility that I might have to leave the country. That's unlikely.
Yeah.
But that is a possibility. For someone who's, highly specialized as me, I also need special tools in order to do what I can do. Right?
Right.
Like if you are a expert miner versus if you are a street side cobbler in a third world country, you have specialized tools that you need, right?
Right.
I can't do stuff if I don't have the tools and the infrastructure, right? You could put an astronaut in a building without a mission center, and he's not going to be able to take you to Mars.
Yeah.
Right. So point is, if I go to a place where I don't have the resources to do what I am trained to do, that is a waste of my training.
Yeah.
That is a waste of,
and it hurts everybody.
Time. It hurts everybody, right?
Yeah.
For what I do, the need is so much. Currently in the city where, I am, there's people wait months to see a specialist like myself.
Yeah.
And people need these specialists. But it is, the current place where I am is not technically considered underserved. But that doesn't mean that there is no need.
Right. Right.
And so that is the other, the concept of defining needs the overhaul.
Okay. Expound on that.
The specialty that I am in, I know less than 10 foreign physicians that have done this specialty in the last 10 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Meaning 10 that have come over to the United States to train to do what you're doing.
Correct.
Wow.
In the last 10 years, I feel there have been less than 10 specialists that in my field that have done the training route that I've done.
Interesting.
Right?
Interesting.
A normal American citizen is not requiring to do the Conrad 30 program, or is not requiring to do any of this. I mean, they have the public loan forgiveness program, which is a whole different thing. But also, just because we bring that up, the public loan forgiveness program and the American Rescue Plan, that has seen increasing funding, but the Conrad 30 has not.
Yeah.
Right. And the Conrad 30 has, like I said, it's gotten no updates in the last 2 decades. So it's not kept up with the changes in the population.
Yeah.
And the changes that have occurred through the physician workforce as well.
Yeah. Now, are there people working on updating that, or is it just kind of sitting somewhere?
The bill's sitting somewhere.
Really?
It was filed. I looked today actually before I drove here. 2021 was the last update.
Really?
Yeah, and it's a bipartisan bill.
Yeah.
So
you would think it would be. It's interesting. So let's talk now. Where we see. Is there any type of change coming down the road that you can see, or are we kind of in this weird sort of ether where nothing's changing, and all of a sudden 5 years from now, if nothing changes, 5 years from now, there's going to be a real serious shortage of doctors? I mean, where are we right now?
I don't think it's going to overnight. It's not going to lead to an overnight crisis where, oh my God, wow, where are all the doctors? No, it's not going to be that. It's going to be gradual. And it's going to creep up on us as the population ages. I mean, the situation currently is pretty bad. Like, I see patients who are trying to see a primary care physician, and I personally I am a physician myself. I called to make a primary care appointment 4 months.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah.
In this, it's we need more physicians.
Gotcha.
Period.
Yeah.
The U.S. is also not the healthiest patient population, right? We have a plethora of problems that the population is facing.
Yeah.
And so we're going to need physicians. Do I see positive changes coming up as regards as immigration? Well, one of the things that potentially could positively impact is, now there's a talk about nationals from certain countries can get their stamps done inside the United States, but it's not extended to the J1 visa, which physicians train on. It's for H1Bs, which is predominantly going to really help tech workers in Silicon Valley, because I guess that's where the lobbying's happening, right?
Yeah. You would think that the medical field would be even more important than the tech. I'm
biased, but I do think being alive is more important than
than the next
technology.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Interesting.
And so I do think that, eventually I hope that gets extended to physicians.
Right.
Because I know of so many physicians, like one of my, colleagues and mentors, who's a foreign physician from Iran. He's extremely specialized. He's 10 times more specialized than me. He's at a big institution. And there's probably less than 30 people in the US that can do what he does.
Okay.
Definitely less than 100 in the world, right? Even he had his own journey with his immigration. He didn't leave the country for 10 years. Like, for 10 years, he's like, I don't care what family member died, I couldn't go back.
Yeah. Well, and obviously, geopolitically, him being Persian
doesn't help either. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so, but that doesn't change the fact that he is such a gift and such an asset to the country.
That's the double-edged sword of the whole thing.
Absolutely. I do hope that there's more lobbying from physician groups and organizations. And I hope that physicians that do want to stay after they're trained on U.S. taxpayer dollars and do want to stay back in the U.S. to serve the U.S. community should have an easier way, whether they're primary care or whether they're specialists.
Yeah. And so what would be We talked about it a little bit earlier, but again, now that we're right there, what would be one of the things that could happen, could change to make that happen? I mean, is it that you work in an underserved community for X amount of years and then immediately your visa changes to the one that gives you the fast track to the citizenship? Or this seems to be the crux of the conversation here is, what can we do to keep those people here that want to be here and want to continue doing and providing a service that is obviously not many people are going into? How do we keep them here?
I think specifically there needs to be an overhaul in how we look at physician immigration.
Okay.
I feel that it is reasonable to not clump physician immigration with other skilled workers or other immigration. I feel like physicians should have a fast track way. If I had chosen to go to any other country in the world, Australia, UK, I'd probably be a citizen by now, or
really?
At least have permanent
because
residency.
You're a doctor.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Interesting. So everybody else is doing it that way except for us.
Correct.
Interesting.
Correct. So, the US basically has one lens on for all skilled workers, and that's just what it is.
Yeah.
There have been talks about having a points-based immigration system that a lot of countries follow. I do think that would make sense, especially for retaining physicians that are trained in the US.
Right. Right.
Other things that we can do is, I just feel the whole system needs an overhaul. We need to be more cognizant of the changes in our population, in that it is aging, in that, a lot of physicians will probably be retiring. COVID actually led a lot of physicians to retire.
Right.
And keeping all of these things in mind while exploring avenues to make it easier for physicians that have trained in the US on US taxpayer bills to be able to serve the community that they want to serve in.
Yeah. And you know what? If you think about it even more, an even higher level, in terms of communities coming together and different people coming together in communities. I mean, think about it. Think about that person who's in South Dakota or North Dakota, who's from India or from Korea or from wherever. All of a sudden, they're part of that community, and the community becomes a little bit more diverse. So all those things that you hear about seem like it would be beneficial to everything.
The other thing is the US is also, like, forget the physicians. Let's forget about the physicians. Let's look at the US population, right?
Yep.
It's getting more and more diverse by the day. To care for a diverse patient population, you need a diverse physician force. Studies have shown that when there's congruence between the physician and the patient's backgrounds, that the quality of care is better and that patients feel more comfortable and outcomes are better.
Right.
And that has been shown.
Yeah.
So I do think that, this is a win-win, because the demographics of the US is changing. And ultimately, I feel you can never wake up one day and be like, we have way too many physicians. I mean, some people probably think that, but the numbers don't lie.
The one thing that pops in my head when you just said that, and maybe it's a little bit pushback, maybe all I know is, at least for me, let's say you're the woman the farmer from South Dakota who has an Indian as her primary care OBGYN. I would assume at some point all she wants to do is know that she's going to be well taken care of. And so that, and I think this is even a bigger argument about the whole idea of, like looking people, if you were my primary care physician, all I care about is that you know what you're doing and that you can take care of me.
Yeah.
Not the fact that you're from India and I'm from South Dakota.
Correct.
I would, and maybe you can answer this or not, but I would be very interested to know, is that something that you get when people see an Indian coming into, is there still kind of that weird, or are they more just like, this guy's a good doctor, we're going to
I think Indians are a very skewed population to look at. We have the stereotype of being nerds and being good physicians.
Yeah.
So I've positively benefited from that.
There you go.
Every time so many times there's patients coming in, they're like, oh my God, all
Thank
my
God.
doctors are
Yeah,
Indian.
yeah.
And I'm like, tell me about it. All my cousins are Indian. And they're all doctors. So, yeah, I mean, personally for me, I feel like I've benefited from that stereotype. But talking to physicians from other diverse backgrounds, yes, there've been certain instances where patients have felt a little out of place getting care from a person that has an identity that they don't correlate or identify with.
Yeah.
But that's rare.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if your belly hurts, you need help.
Yeah.
And if you've been waiting 3 months to see someone who's qualified, the last thing you care about is what they look like, as long as they're able to help you and fix the problem.
Yep. Yeah. And that's as it should be. That's what, at least in my view, that's what America's all about, is the immigrants coming together and melding into it and figuring it all out together. All right. So let's kind of wrap this up here. So how are we doing? Are we America? Are we not doing as much as we should be? Is it looking good? Is it looking positive? Is it where are
it's all relative.
Yeah.
Okay. It's all relative, right? I feel overall when I look at America as a country, I do look at it as the greatest country in the world. And that's because it's because of the diversity. Like, one of the other controversial opinions that I have is we think America is racist. No, it's not. I mean, everyone's racist. Every human being is racist to a point. It depends on how you define racism, right? And how you define being racist. But I've been to other countries where I feel like I've been less welcome. But America, because there is such a melting pot of people from all over the world, I feel like America does pretty well on that front of having diversity and representation from literally every community and country in the world, right? You'd find people from anywhere.
Yeah.
I lived in Houston, Texas for a brief period of time. I was so shocked to see the diversity in Houston, Texas. I did not expect that.
Well, dude, it's the oil capital of America. Of course, they're going to be coming from all over the world.
Yeah. And so I feel like America's a great country. I'm not an American yet, but I'm really proud to be living in America. Yeah. I'm proud to be an American trained physician serving the community in America. I think this is a great country. Relatively, I do think that we need a more logical view on certain things, as opposed to being bogged down by bureaucratic channels.
Okay.
Right? Every country has bureaucratic problems.
Right.
That's the nature of bureaucracy. It's got to be problematic. If it's too easy, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right. But I do think that if this was a third world country, I wouldn't expect it. But because this is America, I expect it to have a logical lens when looking at sensitive things like physician immigration.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, in my view, America, the melting pot is, I don't care where you come from. What I care about is you want to be part of our society, part of America, part of the solution as opposed to the problem. And that's why I was so interested to talk to you about that, is for people that actually do want to be part of the solution, whether or not it's a challenge that shouldn't be there or the process should be easier. And I think, obviously we could talk forever about this, but for me personally, I love talking to people like you, because you are exactly what this should all be about.
And I do think that, one of the reasons why immigration is so bogged down is because there's so much of it happening, both legally and illegally.
Yeah.
Right. And that can naturally overwhelm the system.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very true.
So, I do think that, there should be channels for having people who are having a tough time outside, where, their life's at risk and they're being prosecuted against or persecuted against, and they want to seek asylum. I do think that America is a safe haven for those communities. But at the same time, I feel like it's not fair to look at all immigration as just one, and for the entire thing to be a slower system, because that affects the growth of the country, right? And the same things, if you listen to other podcasts that talk about immigration, you'll see how what happens is these highly skilled workers eventually end up finding a home in different countries. And that is loss of talent.
They leave because it's too complicated.
It's too complicated to stay here. I know so many of my friends who went to Canada.
Really?
Not in medicine, but in tech.
Right.
They're like, well, it's easier, or Australia or Singapore. A friend of mine lived in Singapore 3 years, got his residency. Why? Because he's a high functioning individual. He's a skilled worker, and what he's bringing to the economy, they recognize. But again, Singapore is an island. It's a small country, right? The U.S. is huge
and completely diverse.
Correct. So I do think that the U.S. faces its own risks and challenges. However, because this is the best country in the world, I expect better.
I do too, actually, and that's why I wanted to have you. I want, like you said at the very beginning, I don't even understand what the process is like for people that want to come here and work. So this was very enlightening for me, and I'd have you on again to talk more about it. But I appreciate it, my man.
No, thank you so much for having me. And it was great to chat. And I love listening to your work and all the other things. Guys, please subscribe. You've got to know Rain Man's take on most things.
I did not pay him for that.
He did not.
I love it. No, seriously, Gotch. This is stuff that I'm very interested in because it's all over the news right now, and so I just want to kind of understand exactly where we are and what we're doing, and obviously there's a lot more room for change. So I really appreciate it, brother.
Thank you so
very much. Love it, my man. All right, guys, this is the Rain Man, my friend Ganch. Thanks for watching. Take care.
Take care, guys. Ciao.
Thanks for watching Rain Man's Take, observations on the world we live in. If you like the content, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. You can also follow Rain Man's Take on Instagram at Rain Man's Take. Also, check out our website at www.rainmanstakepodcast.com and send your comments to rainmanstake@gmail.com. Keep an eye out for future podcasts, which will be coming out every Thursday at 5 p.m. West Coast time.